Okay, this is part 2 of the HTTP crash course. I initially intended it to be one video, but I realized it was getting too long, and I hate having really long videos. So I split it up. So if you're looking to just jump into the Python, that will be the next video. I promise this one won't be split. Okay, so the last thing we talked about were status codes. Now we're going to talk about HTTP verbs. And this can be confusing when you first learn about HTTP requests, because it seems like any request, it should work the same way. You're sending a request for a URL. You're asking for, please give me this page, google.com/salmon, or please give me the page, facebook.com. But there's actually a couple of different requests that you can make. And the most standard request that we've talked about, the only type of request we've talked about, is called a GET request. And there's another type called a POST request. And there's actually a couple of others, but the only two we're going to concern ourselves with, the two most fundamental, are GET and POST. And these are two types of requests we can make. Notice when I sent a request to google.com/hello/cult/cat, even though it failed, see this request method? Same thing as request verb. It's set to GET. And what that means is that I'm trying to retrieve data. I'm asking for a web page. I'm doing a search. I'm not trying to write data. I'm not sending data. I'm not trying to update something. So a GET request is for getting information, retrieving. Think of it as just browsing the web. You go to reddit.com, you're making a GET request. A POST request, however, would be if you were trying to submit a new comment on reddit.com, or you're trying to post a photo to Facebook, where you're actually sending something to the server that then has what's known as a side effect. So in a GET request, data can be passed in what's known as a query string. We will discuss that later. In a POST request, you can pass all sorts of data in the request body. So you could pass a photo through, or you could post your Facebook status message in a POST request. But the key difference has to do with side effects. So what this means is a GET request is you retrieving information, saying, I would like the contents of google.com/salmon search, please. And you're not doing anything to the server. You're not adding something to the database. You're not sending any data that is going to be inserted anywhere. You're only asking for retrieval of info. Versus if we are posting a comment on reddit.com, I'm actually sending data along, and I'm saying, please add this comment to your database, add it to the website, and then send me a response. And that has side effects because you're actually altering something. You're changing part of the backend. Two other small differences: a GET request can be cached, POST request can't be. GET request can be bookmarked, so any bookmark you have on your browser is a GET request. POST request cannot be. So if I tried to go to youtube.com right now, I'm making a GET request, and oh man, there's so many things that loaded. If we look in the dev tools, it's pretty crazy, but if we scroll up to the top, here's my initial request. It was a GET request. I'm just asking for information. So here's one more example to show that. If I go to facebook.com as a GET request, which is anything we're browsing, anytime I just type a URL up here, it's a GET request. Let's go to the developer tools. You can see it's a GET. But over here, I tried to sign up I knew this would fail, so I'm not trying to game Facebook. That you can't have a one-letter name. So I put a one-letter name in here, and it treats it like I'm trying to register, right? It sends a request to the server, but then the server is going to say, oh, you can't do that. That's not allowed. You need to have a longer name. But it still gets to the server, and this information is sent to the server as part of a POST request, and it's right here. So register, and if we look at the response is not in HTML, so we will talk about this later on in a minute, but the response is something called JSON. And if we look at it, it says, error message, first or last names on Facebook can't be too short, which is what I got up here. So we'll talk about why that is. And what I really want to focus on is that a POST request was generated when I tried to sign up. So hopefully you can see the difference. A GET request is me retrieving a page, like going to Facebook, or just asking for the sign up page. But then when I actually try and send data, it's actually sending a POST request. So two differences. And from Python, we can do both. A lot of what we'll be doing, and a lot of what most projects, not most, but a lot of projects that we'll do involve retrieving data, getting news stories, getting jokes. We're just asking for information, getting the weather. But we're also capable of sending POST requests through Python. So how we would do that, most of the time would be through an API. Okay, so now let's talk about what the heck is an API. Okay, so API stands for Application Programming Interface. You've probably heard the term before. If you've just done any research around web development or tech, it's kind of a word you hear a lot. And all that it really means is it's a version of a website intended for computers, to talk between computers or between code. So with the websites we see, right, this is designed for a human to look at. There's buttons, there's icons, there's big text, little fields and colors. But if I'm sending code to find the information on this page, there's not much information here. There's maybe, 200 words. That's probably generous. I'm not sure. Anyways, there's a couple 100, 200 words, and that's it. And if I just wanted that information, or here I have reddit.com. I hope there's nothing bad open right now. What I'm looking at here is a version of the website intended for humans to look at. And there's photos, there's bigger text, all the stuff we already talked about, including ads as well. But as far as the information itself, there's not that much here. So this is not an API. This is a human interface. So Reddit has a version of their website intended for computers, aka an API. If I just tack on /.json and I hit enter, this is the exact same information that we saw on this page. But it's not presented for humans like it is here as part of HTML. So remember, if I do view developer, view source, the actual HTML that's sent back is kind of massive. There's a lot of extra stuff. But if we look at the API version, there's still a lot here, definitely a lot, but it's more condensed and it doesn't contain all the information for making things bold or making things blue or whatever it is. So this is called an API. So APIs just allow us to write code that can get data from another application without having to understand how the application works, without having to be a human. We can just transfer data back and forth with another website in a really easy way. That's all an API is. So lots of websites have APIs. GitHub has one. It allows you to, write code that can make a new repository. Spotify has one. You can write code in Python that uses the API to retrieve a list of your playlists, or you've probably seen that you sign up for a website through Facebook. The only way that works is that Facebook has an API to allow that. So the whole point where we're going with this is that we'll write Python code to send a request to a URL. Let's say weather.com. And if I go to weather.com in my browser, as a human, it's going to give me a page with ads and big photos and colors and who knows what else, a nav bar, JavaScript effects and animations, a bunch of extra stuff. But if I'm just trying to build an app that displays the current temperature in, San Francisco or Shanghai or something, all I want is a little bit of data to come back that says something like temp is, 78, something like this, Fahrenheit. And that's ideally what I'd want. Now, this is very simplified, but if we sent a request to the correct weather.com API, which could be something like /API, it's not always. Sometimes there's separate websites like api.weather.com. So this is hypothetical. But if I sent a request to this particular place, which is only intended for code and other computers to talk to, I could get a cool response like this, where my Python code can just take this and immediately do something with it, rather than if I send a request to weather.com, not to the API, and I look at what the response is. Imagine getting all of this back and having to deal with it in Python. This could all be stored in a variable. Where would you even start? It's crazy. And that leads us to another topic called web scraping, which we talk about later in the course. So instead, an API allows us to say, hey, we're a computer. We just want the information. Please send it back in a format that we care about. And there's a couple formats. They're called JSON and XML. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. If you don't know JavaScript, don't fret about it. It's just a standard data format nowadays. XML used to be the standard, but now JSON is the reigning king or queen. Okay, so this has been an insane crash course. I hope 15-20% of this stuck. The key things, we can send requests and get responses in the browser. We can do the same thing with Python. We'll see in the next video. And at the end of the day, we specify what format we want back. And certain websites have APIs that allow us to say, I want this, but don't give me the HTML. Give me the simplified version in JSON. And that's what we're going to focus on in the next video. In the next couple videos is interacting with websites that have APIs. APIs are like these special secret door, not really secret, but a special door, a back entrance into a server that our code can take advantage of. Okay, I really apologize for how long this is. There's just a lot to cover. If you are new to web development and to just the internet in general, I can imagine that was pretty overwhelming. You do not need to understand all of that, not even close. So like I said, 10, 15%, that's okay. I just want you to have heard these words before we start talking about them in Python.